World War I, the Battle of Liège. How could the assassination of a single man ignite the most devastating war the world had ever seen? Why did a tangled web of alliances turn Europe into a ticking time bomb, ready to explode with the pull of a trigger in Sarajevo? And what made the impregnable fortress city of Liège, designed to withstand any attack, crumble under the terrifying power of Big Bertha? In a war that many said should have never been, the answers lie in a chain of events so improbable that it sounds like a tragic play. From a wrong turn in the streets of Sarajevo to the crumbling of Europe's delicate peace, this is the story of how an entire continent was dragged into chaos, and why it would change the world forever. Stick around to uncover the bizarre twists, miscalculations, and blunders that fueled the flames of World War I. Because once you hear how it really happened, you'll never look at history the same way again. The summer of 1914 seemed like any other for Europe. Farmers tended to their crops, aristocrats indulged in lavish parties, and diplomats were busy arguing over minor political disputes that seemed trivial, yet critical to them. But behind this serene image, a storm was brewing. Beneath the surface, alliances were quietly tightening, rivalries growing, and the nations of Europe were unknowingly perched on the edge of a disaster that would shatter the world as they knew it. Austria-Hungary in 1914 was like a tired old juggernaut, barely holding itself together. Ruled by Emperor Franz Joseph, who was old enough to remember Napoleon, this empire was a precarious mix of ethnic groups: Slavs, Magyars, Germans, all bound together under one shaky roof. Among them, the Slavic nationalists, particularly in Serbia, were getting restless, yearning for their own independence and unity. Serbia had dreams, big dreams, of bringing all the South Slavic people together under one grand banner. But Austria-Hungary, controlling regions like Bosnia and Herzegovina, where many Slavs lived, wasn't about to let that happen. These two powers were like a bull and a matador, circling one another, each waiting for the other to make the wrong move. Franz Ferdinand wasn't your typical future emperor. Born in 1863, he was the nephew of Emperor Franz Joseph and next in line for the throne. He was blunt, had little patience for politics, and was generally disliked by Vienna's aristocracy. He also had some pretty radical ideas, at least by Austro-Hungarian standards. Rather than sticking to the oppressive imperial rule, Ferdinand wanted to give the empire's various nationalities more autonomy. In short, he was a reformer, which made the conservative elite as comfortable as a wool sweater in July. But for all his political ideas, the one thing Ferdinand cared about most was his wife, Sophie. She wasn't from a noble enough family to be deemed worthy by the Austrian court, which meant she was often excluded from royal events. But Franz Ferdinand didn't care. He adored her. He famously said, "Sophie is my light." The couple was madly in love, so much so that he once said to a friend, "I'd rather spend time with Sophie in a mud hut than with the emperor in a palace." Now that's dedication, but his life and their love story would come to a tragic end on that ill-fated trip to Sarajevo. June 28, 1914, a picturesque day in Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia. The weather was perfect, the crowds were excited, and the Archduke and his wife were on what was supposed to be a goodwill tour. But lurking in the shadows was a 19-year-old Bosnian Serb named Gavrilo Princip, who had other plans. He was part of the Black Hand, a secret Serbian nationalist group determined to strike a blow against Austria-Hungary, which they saw as an oppressor. That morning, the couple's motorcade made its way through the city, and one of the conspirators threw a bomb at their car. A literal bomb, only it didn't quite work as planned. The bomb bounced off the car and exploded a few feet away, injuring bystanders but leaving the Archduke and Sophie unharmed. Ever the stoic, Ferdinand simply shrugged off the attempt and insisted on continuing the visit. He even wanted to check on those injured by the bomb, saying, "Let's visit the injured. We can't leave without showing some care." Big mistake. As their car took a wrong turn, they found themselves close to a cafe where Princip, likely sulking after the failed assassination attempt, was sitting. But then, what luck! There was Franz Ferdinand and Sophie, practically gift-wrapped. Princip seized the moment, pulled out his pistol, and fired 2 shots. The first bullet hit Sophie, the second hit Franz Ferdinand. They both bled out in the car. As Sophie lay dying, Ferdinand whispered, "Sophie, stay alive for the children." But within minutes, they were both gone. In that brief, fateful moment, the world changed. The news of the assassination spread like wildfire. Austria-Hungary was furious, and they didn't take long to point fingers at Serbia, accusing the government of being behind the plot. Whether or not Serbia was directly involved, it didn't matter. Austria-Hungary wanted revenge. Emperor Franz Joseph, who wasn't all that close to his nephew, still saw this as an affront to the empire. "This cannot go unanswered," he declared. He and his ministers drafted a brutal ultimatum to Serbia, demanding humiliating concessions, including allowing Austrian officials to investigate within Serbia's borders. Serbia, feeling pretty confident with Russia's support, balked. They agreed to most of the demands, but refused to let Austria-Hungary dictate their internal affairs. That was the final straw. On July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, thinking it would be a quick and decisive conflict. They couldn't have been more wrong. The real problem wasn't just the Austro-Serbian conflict. Europe in 1914 was a tightly wound web of alliances. On one side, you had the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. On the other, the Triple Entente, France, Russia, and Great Britain. These alliances were supposed to keep the peace, a sort of, if you touch him, we'll touch you arrangement. But instead, they created a domino effect. Russia, with its pan-Slavic sympathies, wasn't going to let Serbia be crushed. They mobilized their forces, preparing to back Serbia. Germany, bound by its alliance with Austria-Hungary, saw Russia's mobilization as an act of war and declared war on Russia on August 1, 1914. France, tied to Russia through the Entente, declared war on Germany 2 days later. And Britain? Well, they were drawn in when Germany invaded Belgium, a neutral country, in their rush to reach France. Britain had promised to protect Belgian neutrality, and so on August 4th, they too declared war on Germany. What had started as a local conflict between Austria-Hungary and Serbia had ignited a global war within weeks. While everyone else seemed to be reacting to events, Germany had been planning for this moment for years. Enter the Schlieffen Plan, a master strategy designed to avoid fighting on two fronts at once. Germany knew it would have to face Russia in the east and France in the west, but they figured they could knock out France quickly by sweeping through Belgium, thus avoiding a prolonged fight in the west before turning to face Russia. On August 4, 1914, Germany issued an ultimatum to Belgium demanding free passage for their troops. King Albert I of Belgium had other ideas. He wasn't about to let his country be used as a shortcut for Germany to invade France. In a rare moment of pure defiance, Belgium refused, so Germany invaded. And with that, the Great War began in earnest. What was supposed to be a fast-moving war of quick victories soon devolved into something much darker and more deadly: trench warfare. The Battle of Liège marked the first major clash as the tiny Belgian army put up an unexpectedly fierce resistance. For the first time, the world realized this war wouldn't be over by Christmas. It was just the beginning of a nightmare that would last 4 long, bloody years. The spark in Sarajevo had ignited the world, and soon, Europe would be engulfed in flames. The city of Liège, nestled in Belgium's eastern region, wasn't just any old city. Oh no, it was the star of a dramatic show that would go down in history as a monument to defiance, fortitude, and some of the most stubborn soldiers Europe had ever seen. But this was no ordinary battle. This was a tale of kings, generals, and an oversized artillery piece that could shake the earth. Let's dive into the heart of it all. The forts of Liège. A genius at work. Imagine a massive belt of 12 state-of-the-art forts surrounding the city. This was no random setup. It was the brainchild of General Henri Brialmont, a Belgian military engineer who saw war on the horizon. He designed these forts with concrete walls thicker than your favorite grandpa's war stories and rotating turrets armed with artillery that could reach far into the distance. The underground chambers were something out of a medieval dungeon. Cold, damp, and built to house thousands of soldiers. And those soldiers, they would soon be tested. King Albert I, the unlikely hero. Born into the Belgian royal family, King Albert I was not your typical European monarch. Where most royals might have stayed away from battlefields, preferring their cozy palaces, Albert was a man of action. Tall, with piercing blue eyes, he was a king who liked to lead from the front lines, the kind of guy you'd want in your corner during a bar brawl. Or, a world war. His military training had been extensive, and while his personal life was less dramatic, he was devoted to his family and his country. Albert had no illusions about what was coming. When the Germans issued their ultimatum on August 2, 1914, demanding free passage through Belgium for their army, Albert stood firm. "Belgium is a nation, not a road," he famously declared, as his small army braced for the inevitable. Kaiser Wilhelm II, the dramatic one. Across the border in Germany, we have Kaiser Wilhelm II, known for his love of pomp, circumstance, and his striking handlebar mustache. The Kaiser wasn't short on confidence. In his mind, Belgium was a mere speed bump on his grand plan to sweep through France. "Belgium's neutrality is just a scrap of paper," he said dismissively, brushing off the potential consequences like one might flick a lint off a coat. He was eager to see the German army march triumphantly through Europe. Behind his bombastic personality, Wilhelm had a complex military background. Raised in the Prussian tradition, he had spent his entire life around soldiers and military strategy. But as history would soon show, there was a big gap between strategy on paper and actual warfare. General Alexander von Kluck, the overconfident commander. General Alexander von Kluck, the man tasked with leading the German First Army in its quest to crush Belgium's defense. With 100,000 well-equipped soldiers under his command, von Kluck was certain of one thing: victory would be swift. He had a reputation for being as bold as they come, but his weakness lay in his overconfidence. "We'll be in Liège within days," he assured the Kaiser. Von Kluck's army came equipped with the latest in military hardware, machine guns, rapid-fire artillery, and enough ammunition to level a city. His weapon of choice, however, would be something special, a beast of a cannon known as Big Bertha. General Gerard Leman. Belgium's rock-facing von Kluck was General Gerard Leman, commander of the Belgian forces in Liège. Leman was a man of few words, but immense resolve. Short, stocky, and as tough as the forts he commanded, Leman had one goal: to make the Germans bleed for every inch of Belgian soil. He had about 30,000 soldiers under his command, many of them farmers, shopkeepers, and clerks who had traded their tools for rifles. But Leman wasn't concerned with their lack of professional military experience. "We'll make them pay dearly," he told his officers. "Belgium may be small, but our spirit is not." At dawn on August 5th, von Kluck's army launched its assault on Liège, expecting a swift victory. But what they encountered was anything but easy. The Belgians, manning the forts, opened fire with everything they had. Cannons roared, machine guns spat lead, and the sound of rifle fire echoed through the hills. Belgian soldiers, many of whom had been tending to their fields days earlier, fought like seasoned warriors. Emile Léonard, a young officer, famously shouted, "We are not soldiers, we are sons of Belgium." His cry became a rallying call. The Germans advanced, but the fort stood tall, spitting fire back at them. Days passed, and the Germans found themselves bogged down in a bloody siege. General von Kluck was furious. He had expected Liège to fall like a house of cards, but here they were, day after day, being repelled by the stubborn Belgian defenders. "They fight like devils," he wrote in frustration to Berlin. Inside the forts, conditions were hellish. The air was thick with dust and the smell of gunpowder. Soldiers ate whatever rations they had left, their sleep constantly interrupted by German bombardments. Captain Jean de Wouters scribbled in his diary, "The walls shake, dust fills the air, and we breathe gunpowder. Still, we hold." Frustrated by the slow progress, the Germans brought out their secret weapon, Big Bertha. This 420mm howitzer was a monstrosity, capable of firing a shell that weighed over a ton. Designed by the Krupp family, a dynasty of German industrialists, Big Bertha was a mechanical marvel, operated by a team of nearly 200 men. When the first shell was fired, it obliterated Fort Pontis, turning concrete and steel into dust. Leman, stationed at Fort Lanson, knew it was only a matter of time before Big Bertha came for him. On August 12th, the howitzer was aimed at Lanson. The first shell struck the fort with a force that shook the earth. Then came another, and another. One of the shells hit the fort's ammunition depot, causing a massive explosion. Fort Lanson was reduced to rubble. As the dust settled, German soldiers combed through the wreckage. Beneath the debris, they found General Lemon, unconscious but alive. His uniform was tattered, his face covered in soot, but his spirit remained unbroken. When he came to, he looked at his German captors and declared, "I was unconscious, but I'm still alive." It was a moment of defiance that would become legendary. One by one, the forts fell. On August 16th, Liège finally succumbed to the German onslaught. The city was in ruins, its streets littered with debris and the bodies of soldiers and civilians alike. King Albert I, devastated by the fall of Liège, remained defiant. "Our resistance may have been short, but it was fierce," he told his ministers. The Germans, eager to press on with their invasion of France, left behind a city scarred by war. Civilians who had taken shelter during the battle emerged to find their homes destroyed. Some German soldiers looted what they could, but others, hardened by the battle, showed unexpected kindness to the survivors. The Battle of Liège had delayed the German advance, throwing a wrench into the Schlieffen Plan, a delay that would prove crucial in the weeks to come. General von Kluck, though victorious, couldn't shake the feeling that the Belgians had dealt him a serious blow. "We won, but at a cost," he admitted. General Leman, now a prisoner of war, had become a national hero. "We may have lost Liège," he reflected, "but we have won the heart of Belgium." As for King Albert I, he continued to lead his country with resilience. Belgium may have been small, but under his leadership it became a symbol of courage and resistance. By the time the Battle of Liège ended, Europe was engulfed in war. What was supposed to be a brief conflict had transformed into a global catastrophe, with millions of men marching off to war, believing it would all be over by Christmas. But the trenches of World War I were waiting, and the world would never be the same again. As one Belgian soldier put it, "We stood against the mightiest army in Europe. They may have taken Liège, but they won't take our spirit." Coming up next, France versus Germany, the first blows of World War I, Western Front, 10 days of fury. How did the Battle of the Frontiers, a clash fought in just 10 days, change the course of World War I and set the stage for 4 long years of trench warfare? Why did France's bold counterattacks and Germany's calculated invasion plan unravel into chaos, leaving both sides drenched in blood and confusion? And what role did sheer human will, overcoming fear and uncertainty, play in these brutal early engagements that shaped the Western Front forever? In our next video, we dive deep into the heart of these dramatic battles, where national pride clashed with harsh realities and mistakes turned into deadly consequences. Don't miss this gripping journey into one of the most decisive phases of WWI. But before we reveal the fateful twists and turns of this campaign, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. What will you miss if you don't? Only the key to understanding how the war's most pivotal moments played out. Without subscribing, you'll miss out on these epic stories that shape the very foundation of our modern world. And you won't want to be left behind. Subscribe now, and let's uncover history together.